Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Backlot. We are the Backlotboys, and this is episode 3, where we are going to take you down to the pier and come up with our own ideas on how we can envision a properly done Paradise Pier. In our last episode, we've talked about the old Paradise Pier, the renovated Paradise Pier, and now the newly renovated Paradise Pier, which is Pixar Pier. And this will just give us an opportunity to share our own thoughts and ideas on how we would have done it different. Are you excited as I am for this, Boy Guna? Because, man, this is my bread and butter.
Friends and neighbors, everybody at home, everybody on the road, everybody listening to us from the office or wherever you happen to be, we are very excited. We're very excited. This is the third installment, and this is the one where, if it seemed like we were salty in the last episode about certain things that Disney went ahead and did, our whole philosophy behind this is no pier left behind. So we're here to talk about some alternatives to what was done initially, and there's a couple other little components in the show. But yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait. I really wanted to talk about some ideas that have been on the back burner of my mind, and then kind of drew some pictures. And yeah, I'm stoked. I can't wait to get into it.
I am too. I love to just come up with ideas, world build and designs, architecture. That's my thing I love. So having
He's an idea man. Thrives on enthusiasm.
Having this new medium to express those ideas just gets me super excited. And that leads us to a huge thank you for everyone out there that is tuning into the podcast. And we finally got the YouTube channel set up and ready to go. So a big thank you to everybody who's subscribed over there. And yeah, just really thankful for each and every one of you guys who are enjoying the podcast. Now we have a new segment to the podcast. This will be our first one. There it is. That's the Kingdom Cable sound coming in, because we're going to have a new segment at the beginning of each show, and that'll just be some news story of the week that we're excited about within the company. And we're very excited about the renovation to Dumbo at Disneyland. I know that sounds funny at first, but it's actually quite a big deal, because there's a couple enhancements in this that I'm very excited about. You're a big fan of Dumbo, am I right, Boy Guna?
Yeah, it's okay. You get up there, and the only thing I've always wondered is that the ears, they don't seem like they're supported by much. Have you ever leaned on one before or put a little bit of pressure on it? You can feel a little, there's a little give. There's a little give. Enough. But I don't know if there's like a fiberglass component, but you could almost hear threads just go like pop, pop, pop. So I don't know for sure. Again, I like the ride. I've worried about the integrity, but I like the ride. Always love the ride.
Did you know back in the day, for a very short amount of time, the ears flapped up and down as the ride went up and down? So the ears just kind of flapped.
What happened to that? What happened to that mechanism?
I don't know. Maybe it just broke, and Raleigh Crump's just like, get this out of here. I don't know.
I'm thinking about Gurr and Crump and all these guys, and they're just and this is with regards to everything that's going on at the park right now. And I wish I could sit down with them and just have a nice conversation and figure out what in the world's going on.
So they renovated Dumbo, and not just like, hey, we threw up a little paint or this, that, and the other thing. They tore Dumbo completely out and rebuilt it back up. And along with that, the structure, so we'll get to the kind of the surrounding area in a minute, but the structure of Dumbo has been completely changed. So you think of Dumbo as maybe more of a kind of a reddish gold in color, and they've completely redone the color to a very, what was the pink color you said? It's very purple and magenta?
Yeah, kind of fuchsia almost, you know what I mean?
Fuchsia.
It's a magenta, you're probably right on the magenta front, but yeah, I felt like it's kind of a fuchsia. Like they really, magenta's probably more accurate though, because they really went from like that reddish, that just like circusy, clown nose red all the way over to this whole other thing. And it's pretty dramatic. And again, I know it sounds Dumbo dramatic, that those two things don't sound like they should go together, but if you've seen it, and you've seen it a lot, and now you see what it looks like right now, the contrast is heavy. It's way different.
I would recommend going onto Google and typing in Disneyland Dumbo Ride, and then have a search for more recent photos and compare the two different tabs. So you see the old pictures and the new ones, and you'll see quite a difference. They've really cooled down the color palette of Dumbo with all these purples and different details like that. One thing I noticed was that the support structure that holds up the actual ride vehicle, which is Dumbo, to the mechanism that makes it spin, has been painted gray, which is like one of those like don't look at me greens, or those things they paint buildings.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a theme like, hey, these kind of blend into the sky when they're up there, and you almost are supposed to not notice it as much as before, where it was much more red in nature. So it's
Mhm.
painted sky gray. And I think that's to kind of make it try to blend in if you're looking at it up in the sky, which is interesting. It's a bit of a
Yeah.
change. But the big change with Dumbo now is Dumbo has an official entrance and a marquee, which it never had before. So that's a big change.
Yeah, it was always like, you would basically walk right into the queue, right? Just the little railings, the little stanchions or whatever. You just pop right in that corral and, wind on through. And I think everybody's remembering this, but like Dumbo, if you guys have been on the ride, it was always so hot over there. You would just cook in that line, and then they'd hand you those wooden feathers and you get all excited, but you've been sitting in line just sweating down the back of your shirt. And it was just really hot. But now, and then I think they put a bunch of umbrellas and stuff over there, but it looks much different. It looks much better now.
Dumbo should never be ridden outside the time frame of early mornings or late at night. Never
late
go
at
on
night
Dumbo.
with the lights and everything. It's great.
It's kind of we should have a podcast where we talk about pro tips. And one of them is there are rides you just do not ride in the day unless you want to have a bad experience. And that is
That's all there is to it. Let's do that. Let's throw that in. Maybe in the first dozen or so eps, we do a little hacks, little pro tips, episode 1.
Yeah, that'd be really fun. So Dumbo has an official queue. It's got a really cool mosaic tile thing just below the marquee. Going into the ride, it now has a shade structure that goes across. There's a bunch of little attraction kind of posters for different circus elements along the sides.
Sure.
The extended queue now wraps all the way around the back portion of Dumbo, where originally you were able to kind of meander around back there prior to the renovation. And that's kind of where you can get your photo on a Dumbo ride vehicle. There was also this kind of organ machine you could go stand by.
Yeah, there was like a big music box or something, and it had didn't the Dumbos kind of move up and down or something inside, or he twirled around on like a little stick?
He opened up and he came out or something. It was
that's right. It was a box and he came out like a cuckoo clock type deal. That's right.
Yeah, so now the attraction queue wraps around that. So it gives the queue something to look at while they're in line.
Okay.
So I think it's about 90% positive. The only thing I would say that I'm a little disappointed at is that they have removed another planter from the park. And what I mean by that is landscaping is being removed again. And that's a fact of how busy Disneyland is and how they're getting ready for Star Wars Land to be open. But it's also a sad fact is this is one of the unique charms of Disneyland is everything was so properly scaled within it. And we're removing these little elements and widening out this pathway and this. And there was a lot of care and thought put into the way everything was scaled, and it's all becoming a little askew, which is kind of a little frustrating, especially when the different pathway materials are there's 3 or 4 different ones now from different renovations all meeting at once, and it's what's going on there?
Yeah, it's like a rave of materials. It's kind of wild, little bonkers over there. Now, is this mainly because of the last time Dumbo was in the theaters, at least from a wide opening, was 1941. So I mean, is this because the new movie is it kind of jazzing up for that, or is it way more related to Star Wars Land opening in the next year or so? They just want to look nice over there. Is that what this is about, or is it about the movie?
I would say it is about Star Wars Land and trying to get the park in the best position possible. You'll notice there has been little renovations all throughout the park, redoing some of the track down Main Street for the streetcars. Small World is also kind of in the same vein as Dumbo, whereas they've taken the parade route and they've moved it over and given Small World a much larger extended queue area with more trees. Same thing with Dumbo having the awnings across there. And you also notice in Midway Mania, they sealed in one of the areas of the queue and added air conditioning. And I think they're going to be doing this with Space Mountain very soon as the Starcade is completely gone, especially on that second level. And they're going to be moving the extended queue into that building, which will be air conditioned. So it's kind of like getting ready for Star Wars Land, bigger crowds, and also kind of helping the guest a little bit by, getting them out of the elements, which is a really good thing, I think.
Sure. Well, isn't there a path? I might be wrong about this. Isn't there a path okay, you're looking at Dumbo, and let's say you're just head on, you're looking directly at it, off to your left, and you head kind of around that corner as if you were going to go back by Big Thunder and all that kind of, the Big Thunder Ranch, and there's all those animals and everything back there. Mm-hmm. Isn't there a path that you can take that you will be able to take into Star Wars Land, into into that whole deal from there?
Yes. So when you go back where the old Skyway used to be, that will be the Fantasyland entrance, is just shy of those Pinocchio bathrooms.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
You go down the pathway a little further, closer to Thunder Mountain. That's the Frontierland entrance in. And then the other entrance is on the complete other side of Rivers of America. That would be the entrance from Critter Country going in. So there'll be 3 entrances going into Star Wars Land, which makes it so that Critter Country is no longer a dead-end land. So that makes it the only other dead-end land in the park now is Toontown. So maybe eventually someday Toontown will meet up with Star Wars Land, and that will give the park a complete flow, and there will be no more dead ends.
Do you think they would ever make another entrance? I know that it's like a whole thing in the front of the park with a transportation queue and all that sort of stuff. Would they ever make an entrance in directly into Star Wars Land from out there, or you don't think so?
I would think the only way they would ever do that is if they built the Star Wars Land Hotel from Disney World, which they're building right now. If that was built, I would say there would be an entrance directly somehow into Star Wars Land. But other than that, I just have a feeling they'll never go with another entrance into Disneyland just to stick with Walt's original philosophy. But they're throwing a lot of Walt's original philosophy out the window. So,
oh, look at this guy. He's salty about it.
Oh, snap. No, it's all right. But yeah, so that's Dumbo. I like it. I think it's an improvement. I think the shade structures are always a plus. Maybe add some fans in there. That might be cool. But yeah, very pleased with that. And
Any
are you ready?
change to the rider's experience? They're just going up and down with that little knob still. There's nothing new.
They threw the little feather over into Storybook Land. They don't use those anymore. They have you stand on little things on the ground. And then once the other riders are done and Dumbo comes back down, these riders from these little things you stand on are moved into the ride. No longer will they have those sticks.
Okay. That reminds me of like when you're at the gym and you're waiting for a treadmill. Say it's just packed, and I hate treadmills. But you're at the gym and you're waiting, and let's say you're on the treadmill, you're running, and you turn around and you look over your shoulder, and there's somebody standing behind the machine. It's the weirdest thing. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. But that kind of reminds me of what you're describing. Hopefully, it doesn't give off that like anxiety-ridden emotion. But I'm sure it'll be fine.
Same as parking garages. There's always that person waiting for your spot. If you're too
waiting.
obnoxious with it, I'm just going to take my time. So don't be obnoxious. Yeah. All right. So I think it's time to lift off from Dumbo and head on over to Paradise Pier and come up with some ideas on how we would have done it differently. From Fantasyland and Disneyland to California Adventure and the Seaside Pier, we have now arrived here to start talking about our ideas on how we would have done this differently. And I want to start with setting the stage for the theme that's going on. So we spoke about this in the last 2 podcasts where they are turning the pier into Pixar Pier. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, you can always go back to the previous podcasts to kind of understand where we're going forward now with the design. So the pier is now becoming Pixar Pier, and with that, they are bringing just, the Pixar characters in. So you see some Victorian themes, you see some mid-century modern, you see some modern of what is that movie called again? Inside Out, of course.
Inside Out, you got it.
So if I was in charge of this, if we were in a drawing room and we were coming up with different ideas here, I would say that let's do something different with these characters. Let's take the Buzz, the Woody, the name your Pixar character and turn them into an old-fashioned look. So it's not that you're going to be changing their costumes or anything like that. You're not going to be putting Buzz Lightyear in a cowboy outfit or anything like that.
Oh, that's the thing. You're talking right now, and I'm imagining like those old West, those old timey photos that people would take with their families. Like at like Knott's Berry Farm or something, and somebody's in a corset, and they're in the back. There's like a saloon in the background, and somebody's holding like a big elephant gun or something, and they're just kind of hanging out, and they've got some cross looks on their face. I'm imagining Buzz and Jesse and all those guys kind of looking like that. That's not what you're doing.
No, not quite. But on a side note, we had a neighbor once and I was going through their house, right? We were going down to play some video games and I was crossing like this section of the house that had a lot of like family portraits and just
you probably shouldn't have been up there, but you're just passing through.
One of them had these pictures of themselves all dressed up as cowboys with, like you said, cross looks, saloon girl, one of them's got a cowboy rifle. It's
always like a sepia filter over that.
Yeah, it was just so weird that I was like slightly shocked, really. But anyway, going back into the pier, so we would take these characters and flatten them down. So you think of them today, very 3D in nature. That's how, the modern animation is. But let's take it back to the 2D hand-drawn animation designs. Make the characters feel a little bit more rough around the edges, make it really come across as a 1920s or 1900s advertisement. So all the
And it's
marquees,
looking like they just came out of like an animation cell. Is that kind of what you're picturing?
yeah, so right out of an animation
Okay.
cell, that's correct.
Okay.
So the characters would be a little bit more flattened down, so there wouldn't be quite as much detail, but these are for the marquees. These are for the advertisements, not in the attraction. So in Midway Mania, the attraction would operate as it is today, the same looking characters, but on the outside and the characters walking around, you know, maybe the characters
really
are
cool.
slightly different designed. So maybe you could even take the color space of the characters down a little bit. Like you said, maybe a little bit of a sepia in a way, or just
mute it. Get some
the
earth
colors
tones going. Yeah.
Mute the colors. And I think that would just be really cool because say you are over in Tomorrowland, you've got Buzz Lightyear over there, and you go over to another area of the park and you got Buzz Lightyear again, and you go off to Tokyo Disney Seas and you got Buzz Lightyear again. But in this particular area, you have the characters in a different design and a different light. You could potentially sell merchandise also
think
with
about
this.
the merch. You know,
So
like, and you know, Disney does not forget about retail. And so, like, you know, imagine that this is one of those things where it'd be very exclusive and it'd be very individual to that particular park, and it would make people want to come to that park specifically from all over the place to check it out and see this different Buzz and see this different Woody and see these different guys. And obviously, we all love when they do the more obscure characters. Maybe that shark that came out of the toy box, you know, I'm Woody. Howdy, 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 howdy. Maybe he's in there. You know, that would be funny. But it's one of those things where, you know, like you just said, you can go from Disney Park to Disney Park to Disney Park to Disney Store and be seeing the exact same Buzz everywhere. Where this is, it would be a different take on it, and it would make people remember California Adventure.
Yeah, and I think this idea can be incorporated to my next idea, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but potentially the operator of the pier has some kind of contract with the Disney Corporation, and they are able to bring those characters into the pier as IP and, you know, revive his pier or something like that. That could be a little bit of an underpinning of a storyline for the entire pier. Adds a character who's in charge, adds a little story on why these characters are there in the first place. So I think there's a lot of like cool ideas that you can do to bring in that Victorian era design to it, have the Pixar characters be infused in it to, you know, give people merchandise and, you know, when families come, they're like, oh, there's the Pixar character we saw in the movie. I guess, you know, Disney sees that as being very valuable if a guest recognizes these characters instead of maybe
and that's fine. But, you know, just have them look a little different.
Have them look a little bit different. And I really envision this entire area to be similar to Tokyo Disney Seas and their trolley light park. I think that's what it's called. It's in the waterfront district. And it's an old fashioned built up architecture with a little bit of Pixar infused, not this over the top, you know, Pixar where there's 3 or 4 different competing themes to it. So what would we do for rides in this particular area? What are your ideas for how we would retheme different rides or how we would put in new rides into the pier?
Well, before I pop in with a ride, I wanted to talk about an attraction. This will be more of an attraction. And it's more of one guy. Mike Wazowski, everybody knows, the little green guy with a giant eyeball, Billy Crystal from Monsters, Inc. I think it would be funny if you had, because now this is so Pixar, it's so like Pixar focused and oriented over there now. You have the walk in Mike's footsteps. You guys are familiar with the walk in Walt's footsteps. It's a tour that's over at the park across the way. Great tour, important tour. But this would be Mike's out there. He's a big green, you know, the costume and everything. And he's one of the characters that has like the movable mouth. You guys have seen the Mickey and Minnie that do this. It's pretty neat. It's creepy and it's neat. But so you do this with Mike, and maybe there's a couple of these. And basically, you know, he gets a posse of people together and he shows them around the park. Not limited to just the pier, but he shows them around the park. If you guys remember, the character Mike had very, very long arms, like disproportionate. And it's hard to even say that there's like proportionate, you know, I mean, it's a giant eye with a couple of limbs, but he had these super long arms. Arms are really good for pointing things out. So he could point up at, you know, Grizzly River Run. You know, he's pointing up there. He's pointing over at Cars Land, and he's doing a lot of pointing, and people are looking, and it's fun, and he's giving a little tour. And if you remember anything about that character too, he was really neurotic, and so sometimes that kind of approach or delivery, what have you, that adds a little bit of passion because he gets fired up. Remember, he gets frustrated really easy. And so it would show that he's got a lot of passion about the sites and the attractions that he's pointing out. And I just think that would be kind of a fun thing, because if you think about it, the park across the way, Disneyland, has, and I hate doing the comparison, but they have a number of different tours you can take there. All of varying, things. Like some of them are so basic and it's just like kind of helps you plan your trip or, whatever you're doing. Other ones, it can get very involved. It can get very expensive very quickly. But this would be something that either would be an add-on to your ticket, or it might just be something that's included. And it would be a chance to offer a tour over at the other park. And now maybe they are doing this and I don't know about it. But I just think it would be kind of a fun thing. This sounds like a joke. This sounds like I'm just saying it's just to have something to throw into the conversation. Not true. It started out that way. But the more I thought about it, I thought, hey, this could be kind of fun. So a walk in Mike's footsteps, maybe we'll pencil it in. It's not like it's not something that they'd want to put budget towards right away, but I do think it would be interesting. It'd be fun.
You're right, because as far as I know, there's very few tours in California Adventure. There was like a ghost tour at one time. But as far as that, like maybe there was one that was like a tour from Buena Vista Street through that area and the streets by the Kathleen Circle Theater and into the Tower of Terror. But as you know, Tower of Terror is gone now, so it kind of
don't talk about that, right? It's just still
is it still sore?
Still so open.
So,
it's just
okay.
I'm putting sport on it all the time. So yeah, let's just and then I think that would be fun. You didn't have to agree with the idea or anything like that, but I just think it would be fun. I would love to see a roaming character, which I know that there is a character like that, but with a moving mouth and with some other dynamics to it, it could be really fun. I think and that would help people. I love the Monsters Inc. movies, and I think maybe it would help. I don't know. It would help get more people behind those.
Did you know there was a rumor at one point after Cars Land opened that they would take the backlot portion of the Hollywood land? So anything kind of where, Monsters Inc. currently is and all that stuff back there, the old Millionaire stage, Muppets, things like that, that would all be taken out and made into Monstropolis. That would have been really cool.
I've heard that. Yeah.
That would have been cool. Especially they would have that like sushi restaurant and stuff from the movie. I think you would enjoy that quite a bit.
Yeah, I like that. Sometimes it's hard to imagine sushi at those parks, especially DCA, because of how hot it gets over there. And the last thing you want is hot sushi. But yeah, and I'm sure they'd figure it out with some air conditioning and things like that. So it'd be all right.
Okay, so I like this. I like this tour with Mike, pointing out things with those big gangly arms there. Would he be getting into some trouble? Because he was always kind of...
Yeah. And I think some of that would be staged. Like that old stagecoach ride that used to be at Disneyland where they would get held up, and the great movie ride where there's also some guys with, with Tommy guns and stuff. So I'm not saying that Mike would have any kind of, like lasers or anything like that. But I do think, he'd get into a little bit of, there would definitely be staged elements throughout this tour, but then maybe some more natural, some more candid things going on, and there would definitely be some theming around the tour itself, but it would also be very informative, and I think it would give people the opportunity to like get a sense of they feel good about that park. They feel a part of it. They feel like it's a part of them, and especially like maybe some younger generations, some teenagers or early 20s, people that were kids going there initially. And so it's like the park has always like goofed around with its own identity. This would give a chance to like, hey, here's this stop on the tour, and here's this thing over here, and here's why we did this, and it's this special thing over here, and like I just think it would I don't know, it would just make people happy to be there.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go on this tour. I want to go on this tour. I want to see Mike pointing out things with those big arms. So now that we're going into the pier with Mike's tour, what rides are you thinking about? I heard you had a Wall-E idea. I am interested in hearing that.
I'll tell you about that later. One of the things that I think would be really cool would be this attraction that would be up-based, because there really aren't, as far as I know, there isn't really like an up attraction. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm not aware of everything that's going on at the other parks, but I think it would be cool to put together this up attraction. And really, if you think about the bare bones of this, of course, there's a lot involved, but all you would really need are like 6 large pistons and a screen, because I'm imagining like a Star Wars style, and it would be much in the same way that Star Wars is. It would be like a various, choose your own adventure ending. So a couple of possibilities here and there. I'm trying to remember with the new Star Wars, I think after everything was said and done, what did they come up with? How many variations? Originally they wanted to have like 54 different variations, but I don't believe that they ended up pulling that off. But it'd be a Star Wars style, probably, this kind of simulator. If you guys haven't been on Star Wars, it's a simulator ride. Everybody gets in a bunch of rows, and you would kind of I think you would be in the house, maybe to start out with, but that would quickly change. And so the actual environment of where you are might switch, or I'm not sure exactly how they would do this. This is super, super early in the planning stages. But so you would go, you would either be in the house, or you could go straight to boarding, like the Spirit of Adventure, the blimp and everything. So you would get in, and here's the funny part. And this is what I think would be funny. And I think as soon as I start thinking of something would be funny, first of all, I'm not funny. So people, are just like, okay, we're done with that. But here's what I imagine. So you get on there. You get into the Spirit of Adventure, and who's the pilot? It's Kevin. It's that wacky bird. So Kevin is the pilot, and instead of Charles Muntz. So Charles was in there in the movie, and he was a jerk, and so we're not going to involve him.
They kicked him out the back.
Yeah, we booted him out right off the bat. Right off the bat, he's gone. And so instead of that, so Kevin would maybe get a little frantic as a pilot. Some feathers are flying and stuff like that, much in the same way that Captain Rex did from the beloved early Star Tours. So he would get a little wild in there, and I feel like it would be really neat. And I know that he doesn't speak, he doesn't speak English, but maybe he would have some funny squawking sounds that would sound like, I've always wanted to do this, just maybe one throwback. Doesn't have to be the whole spiel, of course. Like one throwback line to Captain Rex, and maybe it would be something. And so he would go into that, and he'd fly you around, and he's flying you around in this thing. You go on some kind of fun adventure. I'm hoping in the queue, maybe there'd be some animated, some animatronic Dobermans in there, like those dogs, and of varying voices. And I think that would I just think that would be great.
So it's the Spirit of Adventure that you're on. Maybe you're supposed to have maybe Carl or the young boy. I always forget his name. What was his name again?
It's I always want to say like Kevin, but that's the bird. That's the bird.
That's the bird.
I'm always forgetting the kid's name.
Yeah, that's funny because I thought it was Kevin, but I guess that is the bird. So maybe it's one of them who are going to actually pilot it, but similar to Star Tours, good old the bird comes in there and starts hitting the controls, and there we go. We're on our adventure. Off we go. There it is.
And I think that would be great. And, there could be a couple like, just paying homage to like, Star Tours or something. But I just think, Up isn't really represented. It is a bit of a tearjerker in the beginning of the movie. So we don't even go there with that. Because think about Star Tours. Tons of elements and characters and things from the movie. But as it is now, it's not like the movie. It doesn't have to follow a movie pattern or a movie storyline. It'd be its own thing, its whole own thing. And I have to imagine that there's got to be like some SS3000s out there sitting on blocks in someone's yard. We'll go out there, we'll buy these for a favorable price. Star Tours, I think in like '86, the ride cost about $32 million to put in. It costs a little more than that now, of course. But they could have a lot of fun with the queue. And I almost think like the build up. And so no fast pass for this attraction whatsoever. I refuse. Imagineers would refuse. We would all refuse. And we would make sure, and we would resent that if they did it. And so no fast pass. We would just focus on like just a really immersive experience getting into the ride. And because that's really what, if you think about Star Wars, Star Tours, is a lot like that. It's got a great queue. It's got all this cool stuff to see. They really put a lot of work into it. And I would hate for anybody to be bypassing some really neat elements. So no fast pass. They go in, they do this, and maybe we have we've got a bunch of Spirit of Adventures. So that would keep the ride flow. That would keep things up. The ride capacity in terms of number of people that could get in there would be high enough to where the fast pass wouldn't be needed, and it still wouldn't cluster up that area because, folks, Paradise Pier, Pixar Pier, there's not a lot of room back there. There's the footprint of these rides, needs to remain relatively small until they get rid of that road that kind of circles behind the park and realize that they don't use that anyway. Until that happens, which, who knows when that would occur, we kind of have to be aware with, in terms of exactly how much space we have back there. And I think this attraction could be, it could be housed in a fairly small space, and it could blow people's minds. I think it'd be really great.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Speaking of the backstage area, there is a back road that runs along the perimeter of California Adventure. It meets up kind of where the original parking lot entrance was to Disneyland before California Adventure, of course, was a parking lot at one time. So Disney Way meets Harbor Boulevard, and at that location is where you used to drive into the parking lot. And there's this run that, like I said, it runs the perimeter of the park. And if they did remove that, that would open up a huge amount of space back there for, you know, backstage buildings, and those backstage buildings that are nestled behind Paradise Pier could be moved, opening up new real estate for attractions behind California Screamin'.
Yeah, you're right. So there, you know, I think I'm always picturing that area so compressed and so small back there. You're right. There is more space. It's available. If it's available with the right attitude, you know, the right attitude, you can get anything done.
Yep. All right. I like that. I like that idea. Do you have a location for this? I have a spot that could work for this idea, but do you have a spot?
I would ask you to point that out, because as of right now, I don't know exactly the dimensions of what that show building and, you know, some of the elements that would be around that building that would be necessary for this thing to function. I don't know how much space I need for that. So maybe you can tell us.
I would say put it where Maliboomer once was. That's the entrance. Build up like a really cool, maybe in that particular spot where the roller coaster circles, maybe that is a spot for the Spirit Adventure to park. So maybe that's they can build up something like that for a Zeppelin like parking spot. And then you just do a little tunnel under California Screaming and then into the backstage area, where that's not going to take a lot of space, that particular ride. Yeah. So that's probably going to take up maybe even less space than Midway Mania's building. So there's a current existing backstage building back there, but I bet that could be relocated easily for this attraction. And bam, it's right there.
Let's hollow that thing out. I think in the movie, and I watched a little bit of it to kind of get some reference things here. But I think they said that the Spirit of Adventure, in terms of, you know, how they would determine how big that thing really was, was 22 Prohibition paddy wagons long. And to give you an actual number for that is about 550 plus feet. So that thing was huge. Yeah. So you would want maybe a little bit, you know, I think it would be fun in the theming to have like a little bit of it sticking out of something, much in the way Up was, where things were always like kind of hidden, if you remember. I mean, when they showed the dramatic part of the balloons going up, you start seeing them kind of slowly raise up. You know, you would see Kevin peeking out of a bunch of grass. You'd come through the clouds and the fog or whatever, and, you know, coming down in the thing, and you see that valley, and you see the waterfall. It looks like Victoria Falls, but you see these waterfalls everywhere, and it's like, holy moly, like it would be a lot of that. I almost imagine, you know, the visual experience, like, you know, of this ride being kind of like a blend between Star Wars and Soarin'. You know, I want there to be, I don't know, I would like it to be really immersive, because you remember in that movie when they show that, they show this huge expanse and the waterfalls and everything, and they realize, Carl realizes, he's like, holy moly, this place is real, you know, like, and imagine swooping down there with your legs hanging down. Now I'm thinking of different ideas, but imagine swooping down there and you can smell things and you can hear things, and maybe it's a 4D experience. You get some like water spraying on you a little bit. You could go a lot of ways with this, but I think do Up some. You know, do them a favor, get them on the news. You know, like we don't hear enough about Up. I don't see enough about this.
All right, so that sounds good. That's a location that could be in it. You could even park, like you said, the Spirit Adventure, and you kind of walk through it into the cube, but it's only like half of it because it's just kind of sticking out. So, what is your next idea? What's your next ride?
You want me to go in with this one?
Is it Wally? Because I've been looking forward to whatever this Wally is.
This is gonna be tough for some people here. Okay. All right, so here's the idea. Everybody knows, huge Wally fan, been a Wally fan forever. And something else you should know, I'll see if I can find a picture. I'm pretty sure Scar has the picture. Maybe Scar will figure out some way of popping this in here. But many years ago, when Wally came out, Scar gave me the DVD or the Blu-ray, the set. And he gave it to me for Wally, the film. And he gave it to me in a box it was a box. And on the outside, it just looked like a square compacted piece of garbage. You know, it had like, there were wrappers and there were like bottles and, you know, all this kind of stuff that made this up. It just looked like
my old toothpaste
Wally came in there, he did his thing, scrunched it all up, popped it inside, and then popped it on out. This is what it looked like. It was very neat. It was very cool. And so anyway, that just kind of gives you an idea. We're big Wally fans. I had a lot of merchandise. Some things have disappeared, but a lot of stuff is still hung around, which is great. My son Dane is actually he still uses one of the promotional items. It was a Wally backpack. He uses that for school. He's going to school a couple times a week. He's wearing that. It's great. It's a really nice backpack. Anyway, a big Wally fan. So what I'm imagining for Wally would be something like, here's how I would describe this. It's like an Indiana Jones style ride. It's immersive to the level of, say, even more so, it's immersive to the level of like Transformers at Universal. I think people love this style. And I don't think a lot of people have really been exposed to it, because if you haven't been to Animal Kingdom and you haven't been on Dinosaur, that EMV, that enhanced motion vehicle, ride, the vehicle that you go about the ride, I don't think a lot of people have been in these. And so when I talk to people about Indiana Jones that have never been there, I struggle to even appropriately describe that ride to anyone.
That's true. A lot of people can't contemplate what Indiana Jones is, because it's not a ride vehicle where you just sit in it and you passively, go through an attraction. It's a whole nother thing, because that vehicle passively goes through the ride, but that's only the drivetrain of the vehicle. The whole motion is on the top of the vehicle, and that's where you sit on. So there is nothing passive
about the experience. And so I think people really like this, and think about this, that, here's how we know. When Indy opened, when they had their big premiere, who was at the premiere? Wayne Gretzky. So people love Indy. They love it. Wayne Gretzky. He's a hockey player. He had that long nose. He had a cameo in Mighty Ducks. Anyway, so Wayne Gretzky was at the premiere, a bunch of celebrities, specifically him. Anyway, so they're all at the premiere, so it's good. Wayne Gretzky's there, it's good. And also, back when Indiana Jones opened, it had a big sponsor. It had AT&T was the sponsor, if I remember right. So in this Wally one, I would, of course, like to satirically see B&L sponsor it. By and large, the company that was, responsible for obviously some of the destruction and all that kind of stuff in the Wally movie. I would like to see B&L sponsoring a bunch of stuff, both in the ride itself and also throughout the queue. And again, I don't want to get too much into the queues right now. I think that's some of my favorite things about the attractions themselves, is that build up as you're going through all this stuff and you're getting amped up about it. And it's partly why I don't watch a lot of ride videos on new rides, because I don't want that part of the experience spoiled, because somebody usually walks through it really fast. I'm like, ooh, what's that? I'd rather just see that on my own. So this is Wally ride. And so but unlike Indy, instead of this taking place in 1935 India, you are on Earth during B&L's heyday. Throughout the ride, you would be Wally, I think. I want to say you'll be Wally. And maybe that's your ride vehicle. You're one of the Wallies. If you remember, there were big Wallies too. There was giant Wally that probably housed the little Wallies, or maybe the little Wallies put it all in those big pyramids of the little blocks, and then the big ones come in and smash it more. That wasn't really, we didn't really get to find out more about that, but there were big Wallies, little Wallies. So maybe you're in a medium Wally. So you're in a Wally, and throughout the ride, you go about your day. So it's kind of like in the first scene, and you do that in the first scene. It's like Wally wakes up in the morning, he comes out of that little thing, he hangs out with his little cricket for a second, then he gets down to business, he starts working. And that's scene one. In scene two, you kind of see the first, and that's, let's say Earth still looks pretty good. Like I said, B&L, heyday, got their advertisements, screens are everywhere, nobody's lost the bones in their body yet. They're still, functioning a little bit. And that's all scene one. Scene two, you start seeing the first signs of overpopulation, overproduction, all that kind of stuff. Just the first signs of it. The taste of it is not making anybody sick, but you can start seeing this. And most people who know Wally will know where this is going. And so that's the first thing you see. Scene three, that is the quick deterioration. And then scene four is kind of like, now you're at the beginning of the movie. So now it's the beginning of Wally. And the first thing that you see at that point, and this would be a great immersive experience, is that massive sandstorm, like his solar things are flashing and that sandstorm starts. So that would be a cool kind of like intense moment. And then following that, fast forward through the movie, and there'd be little bits and some things that are kind of similar. So this one, different from what I was describing with Up. This one would sort of follow the movie, but it would give a little bit more prequel, and then maybe it's going to give you some sequel too. So so anyway, the sandstorm happens. You fast forward kind of through the movie, little elements here and there, the meeting of Wally and Eve and stuff. You introduce, to the characters, and then like maybe at the end, during like a happy ending type thing, your Wally is he's planting some stuff and all that kind of thing. But I just think I think that there's so much that you can do with it, and I just, how many Disney attractions feature theming around like a social criticism,
Mm-hmm.
You don't see that. You don't see that very often.
A little bit in the original Animal Kingdom, but most of that's been taken away. Kali River Rapids was about deforestation. Kilimanjaro Safari was about poaching, but they've removed all the poaching elements out of Kilimanjaro Safari. Even some of the elements didn't even make it to the opening day, where they actually showed like a poached animatronic, not dinosaur, what am I thinking, but elephant.
Holy.
And
Yeah.
That got removed immediately, but there was still some elements to it. But other than that, they've pretty much ripped all of that out of the parks.
They really want to be careful with that. And I think this would be, and it could be done tongue in cheek, but why be passive about it? Like maybe just make a little bit of a statement. And to be fair, the movie initially was not supposed to be that criticism, or it wasn't like, I don't know if that was necessarily, that I don't know if that was the thing that they were intending on. I'm fairly certain that it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was, there were other things. It was actually a love story, that they were trying to get across. And, having theming around social, think about this, the UK, United Kingdom, the place has pretty much run out of landfill space. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, Disney's not really removed from those conversations when people talk about companies that are, criticized for, enabling like massive consumerism and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the messaging can be done the right way here, right? And won't come off hypocritical. If Disney were to do this and they were to, make it obvious that, hey, we're making a huge mess, people would walk out, hypocrites, and they're selling all this plastic stuff. So maybe they'll find a creative way around that. But Andy Stanton, I want to say he's the guy who created WALL-E, the concept and everything.
Yeah.
He really insists again that the theme was not, that theme was not intentional. It was supposed to be like a feels piece. It was like a nostalgia movie, and that's why you'll notice that there's a lot of is it Hello Dolly? I can't remember where one of the songs comes from.
Hello
So
Dolly
it's like
is the original.
But it's like it shows like irrational love like defeats life's programming, I think is what he said. Some like a really nice poetic language about it. But what does that mean? It's just like, we're born, we fall into these habits, these routines, these ruts. Eventually, they leave us locked into some kind of, basically we kind of lock ourselves into like a docking station, and we're like on a conveyor belt, and we do this stuff, all that. So I like that messaging. And I like the environment. I like all the messaging. I like all the theming. I like the stuff that happened inadvertently and the stuff that was intentional. So I just think it would be a fun ride. It'd be a thoughtful ride. People would come out of this. They'd come out of here thinking, and it could be very, very immersive. And I think with the effects of the EMVs and if this is one of those ones where you're also putting on the glasses and getting into it that way, that's fine too. I just don't want. I don't want our future generations living in a dump. And so I think that this WALL-E attraction, maybe that could help with that. Anyway, so back to the benefits of the attraction. That I didn't mean to go there with that, but so I think we should probably talk about getting Fred Willard to narrate throughout the queue. He's talking. You hear his voice. You guys know Fred Willard. He was the CEO. He's the CEO of BNL. He's the spokesperson. You saw him come on the screens a few times. If you are a fan of there's a dog show movie called Best in Show. Christopher Guest put it together. If you remember Buck Laughlin, that is Buck Laughlin. If you are a fan of Modern Family, if you're a fan of,
can't look away once you've seen it.
If you're a fan of Modern Family, Frank, Phil Dunphy's father, that's also that's also Willard. So he's great. He's got a really classic voice. Huge philanthropist. He's actually a really good guy. Got in trouble for some stuff a while back, but I think he's got that smoothed over. Anyway, he would be, he would give the safety spiel. He'd probably give the prehash, that video you watched before you go on the ride, and he'd be assuring you, of course, like in this really, just a political way, of course, as he does, And I think that would be, yeah, I think that would be really, his name, interestingly enough, in Wally, I think it was like Shelby Forthright, kind of funny with that last name. But anyway, so people would have fun with that. And interestingly enough, if I looked at a lot of charts about this because I thought the first one that I saw, I thought this was just bogus and somebody's coming out of this not doing any research. But kids ranked Wally more favorable than A Bug's Life, Finding Nemo, and Cars. Yet somehow all the latter have received all those attractions that all those films and characters have received. They've received attractions. Some even whole lands, Cars Land. Think about that, But when kids talked about the movies that they resonated the most with them, or that they walked out of there feeling good, and whatever moods. I don't know a lot of the questions that were asked in this survey and this panel, but regardless, that was the result. That's what came out. So even critics only ranked the Toy Story franchise and The Incredibles over Wall-E. Those were the only two that critics felt maybe had a little more behind them.
I think that's probably accurate. I would say that. I think when it comes to bugs and how they've been represented a lot in the parks is because they were the second movie and they were needing to put Pixar in some way into the parks so they could pull that easily into the parks. Whereas now it's just this whole smorgasbord full of Pixar characters that you can pull from and put into places in theme parks. Whereas they didn't have much at that time. And especially Disney itself during its animation, slumber at that time, they didn't have anything to produce, so they could bring in ants. I mean, they could bring in bugs. Please. They could bring in bugs.
B-movie. They'll bring in a B. Seinfeld's voice is in there.
Yeah. No, I just watched a video explaining that, the ants, the Bugs Life, the differences and how they were conceived and stuff. But yeah, that's interesting. But a lot of people always say, why is Bugs Life here? That's the reason.
So, man, that's perfect. And so the thing, like, if I had to wrap that all up, why Wall-E, why this attraction, why have some of these, touchy things in there? I'd be down to see like any proposed improvements in that area. Honestly, anything. Walt always said, Disney, Disneyland, whatever, it'll never be done. So just keep not being done. We keep talking about, this identity crisis that Pixar Pier went through, or Paradise Pier went through and has gone through and is going through right now. Fine. Keep changing it, keep trying. Eventually something will work. Maybe our concepts would work, maybe they wouldn't, but it's nice to imagine. It's fun to think about it. And it's fun, we're talking about it, you guys are listening to this and I'm sure you're thinking of ways to even improve the ideas that we have. And that's great. I think that's what it really needs to be. And so, but like really, if you recall like really early DCA, what did they have though? They had, because people are, I've heard some conversations and listened to some videos or watched some videos where people are like, they're like reminiscing hard over like some stuff that was completely just didn't make sense. Like they had that Caterpillar Incorporated sponsored agriculture display at Bountiful Valley Farm. I don't know if that's something like that. Sure, California is the nation's #1 farming state. And yep, I'm sorry, Midwest. Some mention or nod to the ag prowess of the state of California would make sense. But, a few cat challengers here and there. I think there was like a skid steer loader over there and they all had glass over all the, nobody's getting in and messing around with the controllers. You couldn't even get in. You couldn't even check stuff out. So I could be wrong, but I think there was like a seed shop over there. Where people are, they're going to get seeds and they're going to carry that around the rest of the day and plant them when they get home.
The seeds are going to die. Plus,
I love the environment. I want people to have a green thumb and I want them to be planting stuff, but they just, I don't know what they were thinking with that. So anything, I'm telling you guys, anything would be better in a lot of cases than what they initially did and some of the things they've done and some of the things they're doing right now. And that's why we're having this conversation.
Did you know at one point those flower beds all had like vegetables? They just had gardeners there just like growing up, all that stuff. I don't think that lasted very long, especially when Bugs Land was incorporated into the area. They took out most of those planters and just put in the different Bugs Life characters into those beds and then put like gravel and stuff like that all around them. And there goes, the rest of that farm stuff.
The last thing I want to do is be in bed with one of those characters. But like the thing is, one of the things that I've noticed too about about that area, and like and how Pixar really fits in with, I don't know, it's just funny. It kind of reminds me of like Roger Rabbit, you know, like older people listening to this will appreciate it, but like, or maybe they won't, but like Roger Rabbit was, you know, it was like it was a live action movie, and then you had some cartoony stuff in there too. Mm-hmm. And it kind of reminds me of that. It's like you have this store that's selling like aprons and shovels and clogs and all this kind of stuff for people for farming, and knee pads and seed bags and all, you know, all this kind of stuff. And then you have, you know, just some zany attractions nearby, and you get the Maliboomers like shooting off in the background. Like, what is this place? You know, I think, I don't know, I'm starting to warm up to Pixar Pier already just thinking about it, because it's like, if they could figure out some kind of way of like having a cohesive story, like you're saying, with this this old timey pier, and then you got the characters like kind of, you know, dialed in for that. And then, yeah, the backstory and all that. I don't know. There's so much they can do, and I'm not nostalgic about that initial phase, other than the fact that we went as a family and had a wonderful time. Outside of that, I'm open, I'm excited, and I'm welcoming of all the changes. I really am.
Yeah, I don't have much nostalgia for the original California Adventure, but say memories as a family. The only thing I would say is I think some ideas were half done and that they could be improved upon instead of taken away. So any other ride ideas besides our adventures aboard the Zeppelin and Wally's trip through the trash mounds aboard the EMVs?
You know, for me right now, I think that's about it. I think you might have a more like, you might have a little bit more comprehensive. And I didn't initially come into this thinking that I was going to be able to come up with any ideas. What I thought I would do is, you know, I thought you would go through and, you know, it's like, you know, beautiful overlay of everything that you want to get done. And then I would just interject like some jokes here and there. But as I started going, I thought, hey, you know, like there are some films, there are some characters. If we have to stay within the Pixar confines, which it sounds like we do, we're shackled to Pixar for a while, to Lasseter, you know, we're shackled to this thing. So if should that be the case, I will embrace it. And I started thinking, and I really love the movie Up, and I love Wall-E. I love a lot of the other movies too, but those two, I don't feel like they've gotten the love that they deserve. And I think there are elements and there are things that happen in those movies that can easily transition into attractions, and not to mention the roaming, you know, the walk in Mike's footsteps. Those are my three things. And I as I got done thinking about all that stuff, and I just thought, wait a minute. I don't want the park to ever stop being done exactly in the same way that Disneyland is. But don't waste, you know, every time they do like these, you know, just like they shouldn't be doing anything halfway. They do too many things halfway right now. And in the long run, it costs too much. It ends up costing them more money, you know, like just take the time, dog the idea. Walt also said, dog an idea until it's perfect. And they're not dogging any idea. The idea is coming out. That'll work. They're throwing stuff around, and then they're set. And again, man, I love the place. I'm not trying to criticize it in a nasty way. I just would like to see some ingenuity. I would like to see some EMVs over there. And I want to see Mike's long arms pointing stuff out, explaining things, and hearing people get excited and want to come back to that park and get an annual pass specifically to go into DCA. That's it. That's all.
And to see Mike point out things with his long dangly
arms. Well, they're specifically going in there to see Mike. Because the tour changes, not always the same. He's not always pointing out the same things, and those theatrics or those staged elements are not always the same either. Keep it fresh. Keep people guessing.
So that is an idea in keeping with the Pixar theme. But what if we go in another direction? What if we go a little bit in an alternate universe, maybe?
That's dangerous.
Let's say we're going to build let's say we have a blank page, and we're going to create a new pier from what we have. We can still keep, you know, some of the elements like the major structures like California Screamin', Midway Mania, things like that. But what I mean by a blank page is the story of the land. So what we're going to do is a lot of like theme elements to start with. So these are the first things I want to do just to make you feel more like you are in the sea, because I think that's an issue with the entire land is it's kind of iffy if you're actually in the ocean. I think we spoke about this before. Where is the ocean? Is it behind California Screamin'? Is it over by Cars Land? Clearly not. That's a desert. Or
there's no way of knowing.
Or maybe it's behind that hotel. Why is that hotel poking up over the California Screamin'? We don't know. So the first thing I would do is I would create an actual beach. So the section from Golden Zephyr all the way to Silly Symphony Swings, and then up into where California Screamin's track is, that would all be a sandy beach. Now, there are currently existing a small sliver of a beach in that area. I would extend it all the way across and put those old-fashioned little chairs that you sit down in and, enjoy the sun. They're kind of like a hammock style. You know what I'm talking about? Put some umbrellas up there.
It's white. It's usually made out of wood, and then it would have like a blue and white striped, little hammocky something in there.
And maybe those old cartoon little changing areas that Goofy would go into, and you'd knock it down.
Oh, it's like a wood. It's like they're wood. They're usually white, boards, kind of whitewashed here at the beach.
Yeah. And so, sadly, Jumping Jellyfish would have to leave, but I think you could still do something with Jumping Jellyfish. I think it could be rethemed, can be moved off into another area. I think that could be easily done. And so that area just becomes a beach, and you instantly kind of recognize this as a beach area. Next thing I would do with the area is something similar to what you would find in Frontierland, where there is the bridge, where actually your entrance to Star Wars Land will be soon. There's these jumping fish, and they're on a track. And every once in a while, you just see one of these little fish jump in the air and they come back down. We're going to incorporate that idea into the lagoon, and we're going to have shark fins. That's right. We're going to have a shark fin that comes up every once in a while and swims across in the center area a little bit. Now, an issue would be World of Color. So if you put it just beyond World of Color by where the sun wheel is, so this little fish tail goes across there, potentially you could even have dolphin, little animatronic dolphins that just run in the water just along the shores. I think could be cool. Maybe even put a couple buoys in the water and maybe have a sea lion, a big old fat guy hanging out there just kind of rocking.
I like that.
I think it would be nice if they did actually make this big buoy kind of rock a little bit, and then the animatronic guy on there, he doesn't have to have a lot of motion, just enough to convey the feeling of a beachside area. So those are some little things to make you feel like you're a little bit more in the beach. Now, they used to have a wave machine. They rebuilt the wave machine back when they redid the area in 2012, but unfortunately they never turned it on in fear that they would break World of Color's infrastructure, which is under the lagoon, which comes up for the nightly show.
What did you call that last time? You called it like a giant aircraft carrier, I feel like.
Yes, if you look at an aerial view of World of Color's platform, which you can see, it looks like an aircraft carrier. You see where the island is, and you can see where, it just looks like an aircraft carrier. And I think the incorporation of just way more palm trees, nobody's going to fault them for putting more trees in the area. So I think that is a big thing that I would do, is incorporate more palm trees into the area. So I want to start where Ariel's Grotto is now. This area will become some form of lighthouse restaurant. I don't have a great name for it, but I would create a lighthouse there. And if you were, say, in the location where you could see California Screaming taking off, so you stand there at the railing looking out, and then up towards Ariel's Grotto, I would change that entire area into a big rock face. So it looks like that area is a giant cliff, and there's a lighthouse up there, and maybe you could even climb up to the top of it and then really get a crazy view over Paradise Pier. And inside there, we could do the restaurant, retheme it. So some of these are just little changes I would do. Make that whole area feel like you're up on a rock. How do you picture people climbing up this? You're thinking of something kind of like Tom Sawyer's Island, like the, little pathways and stuff like this? Yeah, a little staircase going up into the lighthouse. The lighthouse would be incorporated into the existing structure. But then all the areas below it would be filled in with rocks. So it really makes you feel like you are in the really seaside cliffs. And I think that would be really cool. So one of the things I think this area needs is a creator, who created this place? Why is it here? And I think this guy's an inventor, right? So he's an inventor. And once we work our way into Paradise Pier a little further, you find California Screaming. So with California Screaming, this is going to be themed like a seaside hotel. So the station area would be rebuilt to make it look more like a big seaside hotel. Now, the operator of the hotel, that was his thing. He had a hotel, and then he slowly started incorporating attractions to lure people into a seaside. What was his background before he started the hotel? Has he always been this failed guy inventor? That has these funky ideas. Okay, well, there it is. Okay. Yes, so he's an inventor, and we'll come into that in a little bit. So he is over there doing his inventions and stuff like that, not working out so well. So he decides to open up a seaside hotel. So he's got to pay the bills. He's got to do this to facilitate the copyrights and keep the dream alive. Yes. So California Screaming will be incorporated into that theme. Much bigger show, like building, area. So what that'll do is it'll cover up some of the Anaheim Convention Center, the Hilton, the Marriott, things you can see. So I call that magic leaking, because magic's leaking out of the park into the real world. So we're going to close that all up. And in the queue of this area is all of his inventions. So these are all of his inventions because, he invented things that failed, but where he's finding his success is inventing things for attractions, like how to make the roller coaster be a catapult and take off. And this is in olden times, right? This is a 1900-ish. Yeah. So he's trying to come up with these ideas in the queue.
What would be great? Would be great? When you're in the queue and you're seeing these different inventions, how like when somebody's inventing something, they're going to send these letters, to the, I don't know, I haven't invented anything. I don't know how this works, but I'm pretty sure they send a letter to, get things get a trademark or get a copyright on it, or get it approved, or get on Shark Tank, or whatever they're doing with it, doing with it. But I would love to see, here's that invention. Here's like a depiction of it and in the flesh. And then there's like these fake notices with like a nail in them, like above it, from those copyright offices saying why that can't get approved. Or sometimes it's like really brash and they're like, this would kill 100 people, or, like something like that. And just showing all this rejection, and then showing him improve. This is just, I'm just throwing stuff out there, but I just thought that might be kind of neat. Small thing, in the details, but.
Yes. So that's a good idea, because I think once we move into like Mickey's Fun Wheel, things along those lines, you'll just start noticing where things are a little bit Ricky and a little bit, his own kind of concoction, if you will.
Hey, okay.
So with California Screaming, you kind of go through his workshops, his different things like that. Another idea for this area could be also, if you were to kind of take it another direction, would be to theme it towards villains. Like each Scream Tube maybe has some kind of a villain, escape from villains, stuff like that. That's just a potential idea we could work with later.
Are these Disney villains? Are these Pixar
Disney
villains?
Okay. These are Disney villains. So my idea is that this guy, creating this theme park and stuff like that, goes to Walt in the Disney company and gets the IP rights for these characters to be incorporated into the park. So that's kind of how, and some of these timelines don't match up, but that's the thing. We're in kind of an alternative universe a little bit here. And because why else would Walt want to give his characters to this man for his pier and things along those lines? So
maybe we don't know about that either. Some back alley, some agreement that was made long ago,
Yeah, so I just really want to create some character that runs this pier. And, you could still market the heck out of it with all your Disney and Pixar characters. But for those true Disney fans, there is that character similar to maybe something that's at Tokyo Disney Seas with the Hightower Hotel, which is actually Joe Rohde, the whole thing. Just these little things that pay tribute to the fans that care and want to see this stuff. So he's in there. He's got the hotel. He's got his workshop. You work your way through the queue. I think that would be really fun. And it would disguise a lot of the backstage facilities in the area. We move on to the merry-go-round. My thoughts have been twice now illustrated in previous podcasts. Why is there a merry-go-round? Let's do something different. It's going to become a merry-go-round, but a very different one, a very interesting one designed around Mary Poppins. So you get onto the merry-go-round. It's a double-decker merry-go-round. But the trick with this thing is that each one of the merry-go-round characters is independent from the structure. So these are wireless or trackless vehicles that are made to look like they're merry-go-round characters. And so you get onto this thing, there might be some safety restraints that need to be designed.
I'm seeing OSHA, just there, people's hair turning gray, thinking about your idea, from the people climbing around on the cliff to now these wireless characters that are going to run about the park.
I pushed them off the cliff back when we were talking about the lighthouse. So I think you could do some kind of restraint system similar to what they have for Tron or any of these type of attractions now, or Pandora. So you have some kind of restraint like that keeps you onto the horse. And once you start going in this attraction, all the little horses are all in a circle like a traditional merry-go-round. But at some point when the music really hits up, That's when they start moving and freely moving about in the space. And they're just circling and flying all around in this little space. And then once the music starts to come back to, a bit slowing down, everything kind of goes back into a merry-go-round and starts doing the circles and then ends the attraction. It's like a whole nother take on a merry-go-round where they all just break apart just kind of like the actual movie. And that technology exists. This can be done. And I think that would be really cool as an attraction for that. And it's unique. It's not just another merry-go-round. It's something that's a whole nother thing for the area. So in this same area, you'll notice the launch for California Screaming. So this guy, this crazy person who comes up with ideas, he has invented a way of catapulting the California Screaming car through the attractions. So what he's using is a lot of steam, a lot of brass, and that's where it kind of comes into a little bit of a steampunky feel with a lot of those elements, right? You have these big steam billows that come out and maybe some little mechanical wheels that are turning on the sides. And it's just bringing you back into that time period, because as of now, if we are back in 1900s, I mean, they didn't have linear induction motors, which is what propels the roller coaster today. So you see that down there, and it's fun because if you're watching this, you see this stuff start moving and steam billowing as the train approaches and then takes off. So that's one idea. Moving on to Mickey's Fun Wheel, it can retain.
People there, I'm sure like 99,000% of everybody listening, they are very aware of what steampunk is. But what it is, if somebody doesn't know, it's kind of like people romanticize about this era that never actually happened. And essentially it's like a hybrid or like a combination of the Industrial Revolution and also the Victorian era. And it's really fun. I mean, if you think about it as like, if you ever seen Wild Wild West, it's kind of like Loveless in that, he's obviously something terrible has happened with his body. And now he's attached to this like spider erector set looking thing. And it's just a lot of gears and pistons and things. It's an overcomplicated process to create a fairly simple objective. But I'm saying back then, this time didn't really exist, but back then, in quotes, they didn't know how to do these things. And so these inventors, these like mad scientists or Doc Browns or whatever, they're in there and they're just like making this huge, everything's like a Rube Goldberg basically to, produce a light to turn on. And that's what he's doing with, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, sounds like that's what you're talking about with the propulsion for the roller coaster.
Yes, that's a perfect explanation of that. So Mickey's Fun Wheel continuing to be the same kind of design. I don't think there's a lot of things that would change too much with this attraction other than the fact that it needs to have some theming built around it. So I think we would take out this square kind of dam that it is, because it's technically you're underwater. So these walls are built up. It's like a bomb
shelter.
Yeah. So I would turn that into, add a bunch of cool rock and designs all around it. In that particular location, I think I would put lots of boats moored up against the pier. I think that would be kind of cool to look down and see the boats floating in the water. And the wheel is really interesting because we're going to build these overly complicated pistons and different cranks and gears turning and stuff. And it's all breaking down. In the queue, this is kind of your entertainment. Well, you sit there and watch all these gears turn, and maybe some of them kind of break at some point or make a weird sound. And it's just kind of a fun little take as this guy kind of put all this together here. And it gives that feel of an olden time based on kind of the design of it and the steam, instead of just seeing like a giant tire that actually controls the whole thing. But if that's all covered up and made to look way overly complicated, like you had said, I think it would be a lot more fun. Another thing would be is inside each of the gondolas, if you had some kind of narration, maybe this guy could have a narration of the entire pier. He kind of points out things and tells a little story about this area and what happened here and how this was constructed. This guy's a little bit full of himself, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe it would be about stories.
He's very, very, very happy to tell his story.
Grandiose, if you will. Maybe you caught a big fish, or he did this or that or whatever. And it would just be a fun little thing as he points out different things around the pier. Maybe there's even multiple narrations and stories that he gives as he goes along the wheel. I think that would be really fun. It would just add a whole other element than just sitting in a gondola looking out. But actually have the character telling you to look towards certain things and telling a story. So you'd all be in the gondola looking down and seeing these particular things that the narrator is saying inside of the vehicle. So there's some of the ideas in terms of where I kind of see the entire area is that it's kind of that steampunky feel. It's this old fashioned. All I want to do is add an old fashioned and more seaside environment to it. And, you know, with this, you could incorporate all those Pixar things into it. Maybe not the mid-century modern Incredible coaster, which I like, but I just feel like it doesn't quite fit. Quick side note, actually. Here's an interesting tidbit. When they were
pen and paper. What's he going to say here?
When they were developing Cars Land, they were also developing an idea for an Incredibles ride, which would be in the kind of what do they call that area where the Lucky Fortune cookery
that was the Pacific
Wharf. The Pacific Wharf. They were going to
San
build
Francisco, kind of Embarcadero looking place.
Yeah, they were going to build an Incredibles ride there that was themed to kind of a warehouse, if you will, which would have fit into the theme, and that would have been the Incredibles training ground. And you would be able to be in these vehicles, and you could select in the vehicle because they were bent on those giant like Kuma arms that moved around.
Oh, I love those. Those are so cool.
But see, Disney lost the contract to them, and that went to Universal, which then Universal used that for their Harry Potter journey. But Disney had an idea with that.
For the record, that scene where he's going through the forest, I think it's the Whomping Willow you're talking about that does this. It is unbelievable. You guys go on this ride. It's out of control. It's insane.
Yeah, so you would be able to control on the thing how intense your ride would be. So you see, you know, how much the arm would move and do stuff would depending on what you selected as your intensity of the attraction. So this is a fun little side note. Never happened because they lost the contract. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, see, this whole theme is adding story to it and adding things for people to discover, because that's what Disney fans want. And sometimes I think that gets lost in maybe more of a corporate environment, that there's so many people that actually go and look for these things. And you can sell books and merchandise and t-shirts around some of these themes and ideas and characters that the parks create themselves. So people go and seek out that type of entertainment, that merchandise and stuff like that. Because sometimes you got to think in that way too, you know, merchandise and stuff. I don't know. I think you could do so many fun things, like potentially where the Malibu River once was. You could build like one of those old fashioned parachute drop rides. There was even, like we mentioned in our first episode, that they did have a Green Army Men design like that. These little things that bring you up a tower and then they release you, and then your parachute above you catches you, and then you go like kind of floating downwards. Like that fits in really well with the seaside theme. It could have been a really great replacement for the Malibu, which never unfortunately happened. But yeah, those are just some ideas that just kind of add more life to the park, to add more feeling like you're in a particular time and place. And that is one of the things that I feel is missing from the land. I don't have a ton of like ride ideas, but it's more of placement and theme and world building is what I see that area needing the most. Yeah.
I think that's, I don't know. People probably think a lot of this stuff is scripted, and there are actually many times that I asked Scar to send me a bulleted list of everything he was going to talk about. He refuses to do that. And so just so I can kind of, you know, prepare, but I think to keep it more natural, you know, we have our own things, and this is the first I'm hearing of this, and probably the first he's hearing of the Wally thing, unless he's got a little something listening in my room. You know, I think that's a great idea. That's so cool. It's so different. It's so derivative of what they've been doing lately, and you know, so much reliance on IP, so much intellectual property that they just keep compounding on top of. Now I feel cheap, you know, for my Pixar ideas, but I think yours is really cool. I really like that.
I think you can still have the IP. I think lately it's kind of an either or. Either the attraction is a unique attraction that Imagineering has dreamed up themselves, or it's Imagineering taking an IP from Pixar or Walt Disney Animation and incorporating into the park. But I kind of feel like this blends both of them. It gives Imagineering opportunities to be creative and come up with their own ideas, but still incorporate these IP that management really wants to infuse into the parks. So I think it kind of gives even the fans that are seeking out these new ideas, they want to see, not new ideas, but they want to see the old ideas of Pirates of the Caribbean and Haunted Mansion, and it gives them something. It gives management and even just families that just want to see the characters, like, I come to Disney to see the character. It gives those people those opportunities. It just gives everybody something to see and look forward to within the land. And I just think it just sounds fun to have this like strange thing. So one last thing that I would do is you need to have some kind of mysterious, spooky element.
Museum of the Weird.
So you got to have something like this. You got this guy over here. He's some kind of inventor. He doesn't do things quite right. So maybe that leads to something mysterious. You need to have something like that in the park, just something mysterious. And that can be over where the Paradise Grill is. I think we could take that restaurant and we can move it to 1,000 different places in the park, potentially move it to where the shops are currently in the boardwalk. Maybe you could build up a restaurant there. But in this location, some kind of a fun house. Something that maybe has gone awry. Maybe he was building his own mansion, right? And maybe something went awry there. You know, maybe, I don't know. I don't have this fully like envisioned, but I feel like there needs to be some kind of a haunted or some kind of spiritual, scary thing that goes on over there just to kind of balance it out, because the loss of Tower of Terror has put kind of a bit of an empty spot when it comes to that kind of darker side, whereas Haunted Mansion fills that very well in the sister park, of course, Disneyland, and maybe even Snow White. And these things fill that kind of darker spot. But I don't know. I'm going to continue to think about this idea, but there needs to be some kind of thing over there that's the haunted element of the pier. I don't know what it could be, but I think we could think about it. I don't, like I said, maybe you guys out there could help me think of this in the comments, things like that. Tell me what you think this maybe mansion would be like. I don't want it to be ghosts, because that is the Haunted Mansion. I don't want it to be the same theme as, say, Hong Kong with their Mystic Manor. So I don't want it to be like that. But I don't know, some kind of mysterious fun house thing. Maybe something.
Don't you think that it would have to be kind of associated with, if you're going to stick to the theme, you know, think about things that are like spooky or mysterious or unexplainable that happen around water or around boats or, you know, things like that. A fun house would be just, I mean, if the Imagineers had their way and they had, you know, they had unlimited funds, I can't even imagine how wild something like that would be.
Maybe I'm overcomplicating it. Maybe it could just purely be a fun house.
Would this be a walkthrough, or would it be a float, or, you know?
I think it would have to be. It would have to be an
things?
attraction. It would have to be an attraction, and I think what it would fully replace is Goofy's Flight School in that area. Maybe potentially you could still keep the boardwalk garden and pizza area, but have the entire area over there transformed into this fun house. But maybe the fun house has a life of its own. And like I said,
Let me try this. You know, I almost feel sometimes that Atlantis was not a Disney movie. Atlantis, by the way, is a very, very good movie. I'm talking about Atlantis as animated film, The Lost Empire. Because there's like some elements between the characters that is just some interactions and some struggles and some things like this that don't exist with their other. Well, because you can pretty much look at a lot of Disney movies and say, hey, that's about the same course of events that occurred. Somebody died, everybody was sad, they came back up, and then the grass turned green at the end. This was different. This movie was very different. And so the thing that I want to say is, imagine that, you know, some kind of, and it doesn't have to be Atlantis. But, you know, Atlantis had some cool structures that were a little bit steampunky. There was an inventor involved, and maybe, you know, something kind of like this. You know, and it's not it doesn't have to be the Legend of Atlantis. It could be the legend of something else. It could be fictional. It could be something that is loosely based in some type of folklore. But I could kind of see that it's not ghosts, and it's exploration and it's discovery. But it could be maybe they discover something that they'd rather keep down there, you know, and then that's the rest of the ride is you coming back up saying, hey, you know, let's stick with the hotel and all that stuff. And then that's the end. I don't know.
That's interesting. You could take that element of maybe something from the sea has taken over. But one thing I wanted to point out too was that the podcast has been kind of like a stream of thought, like a conscious like thought instead of like a lot of written down things. So that's why I'm just kind of like envisioning in my head. And one thing I wanted to point out was that at times I think we can overcomplicate attractions and add way too much like story element and too much maybe spoon feeding you how everything is going and not leading you to use your imagination a little bit as you explore the space. This would be the case with Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean. These are attractions that don't fully tell you what's going on, but you use your imagination as you go through this. This is more of an experience than a narrated experience. So with the attraction, what do we call it? Just a fun house of craziness. maybe that's just it. Maybe you go through things similar to the Haunted Mansion, not ghosts, but this kind of fun house where things are kind of mysterious and moving around and a little bit spooky. And maybe that's just a fun, different thing. That's not something that you're going through as a book report or something like that, but it's different. It's just an experience and not so much of a narrated experience. Interesting. I like it. I said experience 5 times, but I'm very excited to experience this.
I almost imagine that it would be something similar to this would be like looking around and I don't mean looking around for people to go do this, but taking a authorized tour in Tony Baxter's backyard. Because throughout the estate, that he has a lot of stuff from past attractions, from probably some stuff that didn't work out. I just imagine lots of stuff around, and you being able to essentially write your own adventure by cruising around there, and you develop your own story.
Mm-hmm. If you had to add a story, potentially he opened up some kind of little portal with his inventions that brought in some kind of little spirit, or maybe there's a spirit from the ocean or something that's kind of just animated all the things. But then that kind of goes back to the Hong Kong attraction, which I want to stay a little bit away from and just kind of keep it as that fun house. So you really do feel like you're going through a seaside, amusement attraction. But I think that could be fun. Just something different, not attached to IP. We have a lot of other IP in the area. Just an experience as you go through it. And the last thing I'd like to see in Paradise Pier is some kind of people mover style attraction. Something that is for the children, the elderly, the disabled. Not everybody can go on the wild rides. And it's just something simple. I don't know what it exactly could be. It could be a boat attraction. It could be some kind of gondola thing. It could be anything to have some kind of transportation around the entire pier, and you can kind of look out and see all the different things as you go along. It could be a small bus that goes along the pathways. The pathways might be a little too small for that, but maybe just like a boat ride through the
So we're not talking e-ticket. We're not talking e-ticket stuff here. Okay.
Just something for everybody, something simple. It's something I wish California Adventure would have incorporated into the early days, is some kind of train equivalent for California Adventure. I think those things are important. They're not always thought of these days because, you think about how much kinetic energy these create in Disneyland, the train, the Mark Twain, the Columbia, these different things that most likely might not make it into the design of modern theme parks, but they add so much, and it's what Disneyland has so much character built into it. It's why people always go there and still consider it the best, is because of these attractions.
I'd love to ask a question, and this is more for people that are listening. If you would, maybe post a comment or something. Let us know. I'm curious. Scar has a lot of great ideas. There's no getting around it. If you were to think of him in relation to what either current Imagineer or deceased or whatever they were, any Imagineer in Disney history, like who do you picture when you're hearing some of these ideas from this guy? Because mine is like a funny, just like a Picasso version of him. It's just like a bunch of different variations. Like sometimes I think the great Raleigh Crump I think of with you, where you're talking about this fun house, and I'm thinking of Museum of the Weird. And then sometimes when you're talking about like some of this like old timey stuff, I'm almost picturing like a Ken Anderson. No relation. And I picture like so many different little things, and I'm not going to say Mark Davis because that's a little bit too cartoony for you, but I just see, and not that there's anything wrong with that. I just see so many different Imagineers kind of in your ideas. I think, I don't know. I just see, I see a lot of different Imagineers, and of course you have your own style too, but it's just, I'm picturing this whole place. And now this last thing you said about this boat ride, kind of tying the land together, and maybe whether the boat is seen as like an actual transportation thing and involved in the theme and involved in the story, or if it's like an outsider's ability to look in and kind of point out the things. Hey, let's go check that out. Let's get in line for that. Let's say if there's a fast pass for that, we're grabbing it. Like you're seeing, and maybe it's that, maybe it's the circle tour of the place, or maybe it is deeply intertwined into the story. I don't know. But I'm just picturing the theming, and I just see this place just, I see it looking, I don't know. Now I want to take all my back. I'm behind these ones. We'll get the funding. We'll send the letters to Imagineering. We'll just send them this podcast. They'll listen to it. I think those are really, really, really great ideas.
all I want to see with Paradise Pier and from the beginning is more placemaking, make it more feel like a real world and something that you just want to spend more time in. And I think some of those ideas, I love the Wally idea. I want to go on the EMV. I want to be moving over all the trash. And also I like the idea of having 2 attractions in your ideas. One would be a unique attraction, like you said. It doesn't follow the standard story of a movie. But then the Wally's different in that it follows the movie, but has more of a prequel and then a little bit at the end to see kind of where it's gone. So you can add those 2 extra elements that give you value added to the attraction. So it's not just a retelling, but it gives you new story in the Wally universe.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah. And I don't want to go back to the Up one because I know that was kind of a small and I don't want to say like poorly conceived, but it's in its infancy. The neat thing with that, much in the same way that Star Wars, the adventure continues type thing, there's lots of reasons to go on the attraction again, and that, I think that was one of the things too that they had talked about a lot with early California Adventure, and we may have mentioned this too. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of return factor. There's not a lot of RF with a lot of those initial rides because it's like you went on it once, you knew that same experience was going to be the same, if not a little bit downgraded because now you know exactly what's going to happen. That Whoopi Goldberg, runaround thing that they had, that kind of stuff is, it was like a one and done. Whereas with a lot of these things, like some of the stuff you're talking about, and I think with that Up attraction where we could have, 30 some odd different experiences on that. And again, the more iterations of the ride, I found out with Star Tours, the more expensive obviously it gets. And there's a lot more mechanics and other things involved, but it just it will give people lots of reasons to come back to California Adventure. They don't just go for the opening and they go on a couple of these rides and they see the Incredicoaster and they're like, oh yeah, that movie was pretty good. The second one was all right. It makes them want to come back and experience the park, not just, oh, so that's what they did with The Incredibles. Okay. Heading back over to Disneyland and we're going somewhere else. I mean, Disney has, this podcast is getting long, but I'm just having fun with it. Disney has really kind of got behind there for a while when Universal just ran off with Transformers and then they ran off with Harry Potter and stuff like that. They started setting the bar, and that had never been done before, at least not in the LA area, as far as I know. They really, I don't know. I can't imagine what things were like in Glendale and some of those meetings where you have these Imagineers who there's so much cloud and there's a lot of expectation. There's a lot riding on their shoulders. Like, I can't imagine being a creative person, but having deadlines. I don't know what that would be. I don't know what that would be like. It's great for us, for you and me and everybody at home, or some people at home to sit here and think about this with no confines. We have no structure and there's no bounds, we can do whatever we want, but these guys they have a budget and there's politics and there's all this other stuff. So I just hope that if any of them ever, if lucky that any of them ever actually listen to this or see any of the stuff that we're talking about, that they understand that I have a ton of reverence for what they're doing, and I can't imagine what that. I just respect for it. But again, we're critical about this stuff because we love it, and we would really like to make sure that that same passion is shared by the people implementing everything.
That's true, and I think that concludes our Paradise Pier 3-part series here on the Backlotboys podcast, and I really enjoyed it. I think it was fun to look back over Paradise Pier's original designs, their renovated designs of 2012, and now moving into Pixar Pier, and how we would do things maybe a little bit differently. I loved hearing like your ideas for Wally, and of course Up. I think those ideas are really cool. And I hope just maybe I know, like you said, I think we have a tremendous amount of respect for him. We can't even imagine what kind of stresses and forces move things around and why decisions are made. It's just fun to kind of sit back, relax, and come up with ideas as we come up with them. And, certain ideas like, say, the boat ride, it might not work inside the things. It's just kind of fun to think about because of World of Color infrastructure, stuff like that. But it's fun to think about these things and to come up with them because we care so much about the parks. And there we go. I think that was a very good podcast to get our ideas out there. And
one thing that I think would be cool is, we talked a lot about attractions. We didn't really talk about food carts and all this kind of stuff. We didn't really need to. That's all small stuff, and that'll all fit in once the theme is established. But if we were to do this, did you decide on it being a fun house? Like, it's kind of a fun house type thing. Say it's a fun house. And I'm going to bring this guy up one more time. Raleigh Crump. That's with an R. R is in Romeo. Raleigh Crump. Raleigh Crump drew a picture. This is a long time ago, and he drew this picture. And I think that this was supposed to be part of music. If anybody has seen the interview where Walt is talking to Raleigh, and he says it like this: "Museum of the Weird." I love the way that he says it. But anyway, Raleigh drew a picture of a guy called Candleman. Mm-hmm. And I highly, highly suggest, if you're listening to this right now and you have any kind of internet access, even if it's 56K straight dial-up, it's worth it to wait for that page to load. Type in Raleigh Crump, Candleman, all separate words there. Check it out. It is very, very odd and extremely creepy. But I think this character, I would love to see having a too large size role in the Funhouse.
Oh, I like that. Bringing the Museum of the Weird back. Walt always loved that. And I think if Walt, lived into the design phase really of the Haunted Mansion, I think there would have been more of the Museum of the Weird somehow incorporated into that attraction. But
the world would be a dramatically different and much better place had Walt lived a little bit longer.
Yep, I agree with that.
And I'm not just talking about theme parks. I'm talking about the whole thing. This guy... I'm going to get emotional. I'm going to stop, but
So anything else before we wrap up the podcast today?
No, a couple of house cleaning things. We started the YouTube. The YouTube channel. I know that there's been a few subscribers. There've been a lot of views. We're happy with it. Looking at the analytics, we have some friends down in Mexico, it turns out, so that's nice. One of the things that we are looking to do is we're going to put some video into this. We're going to figure out a way to kind of split screen. As you know, that I'm here in the Midwest, and Scar is out there he's in the Pacific Northwest. So we are a little ways away from each other. We're about 1,500, 1,600 miles away from each other. It is difficult to do this, but we find a way. But what we're looking for is we want to add some video components. So you can see us talking while we're doing this. We'll be able to put more images up on the screen as we reference things. But we still want to also stay true to the podcast aspect, because we know people are listening and they're not looking at a screen. They're doing something else. We're in the background. We're way, way, way in the background. But I really, again, and as always, just really want to say thank you. This is so much fun for us. Scar, tell them we've been thinking about this, talking about this, something like this for such a long time. And it's got so far to go. But I'm just happy to be part of the process. Everybody wants to be a part of the miracle. I feel like I'm loving it. I like it a lot.
I agree with all of that. And so as always, guys, thank you so much. Thank you for watching, and of course, all of the nice comments and ratings. We would love to incorporate a user segment at the end of the podcast. So in the YouTube comments or on Twitter, any of these places, send us what you want us to talk about. If you have a question, if you want us to tell us a story from our past experiences at Disneyland, or maybe a history item, let us know in the comments of YouTube or on Twitter, or any way you can contact us. Please let us know, and we'll incorporate that into the show. We'll give you a little shout out and everything. And with that, I think
can I fire a fake question at you real quick? Just so you'll give a super short answer. Fake question. I'm a fan. I submitted this. I slid into your DMs. Here's the question: was there ever a time at any theme parks that you were truly terrified, in the spirit of all this Museum of the Weird stuff? Whether it was like an intentional attraction like the Haunted Mansion, or there was something super weird on the Jungle Cruise. Did you ever feel like that experience, what you were seeing right then, was so real that you were in danger?
I was thinking about this last night. There was a time when I did think that Star Tours was real, or I was thinking, is this real? Like there was a time where I thought that was real. There was a time when I thought the submarines actually dived way under sea. Like they were like way, way underwater. But the real thing, these are all when I was very, very young. But I would say,
was this like a couple of years ago?
No.
Yeah.
This was very young Scar, but I would say the time that I was the scariest was the time that you and I went to Disneyland and we went on the Haunted Mansion at the very end. I remember the person said, okay, you can go when they held us back. They let us go through. We waited till everyone filed through the stretching room and they were already out, cleared the hallway, and then we left the stretching room. We walked along where the changing portraits are on your right, and on your left side you have these windows and there's lightning and stuff. And we stayed around for a second, and somehow in the narrator's voice, that very spooky voice, they said something about "don't lag behind" or something like that. Like it was clearly not the ghost host, but it was a very spooky sound, and it scared us both. And we went running towards the entrance of the attraction to get onto the dune buggies. We did this again, and it was just a standard like, "Please don't stay behind, continue on." Like it was very.
You know that the ghost host at one point does say, "If you insist on lagging behind, we may not need a volunteer." You know, he says something like that, but what we heard was different. And then, like you said, then just a dorky, tourist gets on there like, "Let's go, guys," or like something like that. But the thing that we heard in between there, I remember that, man, that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. It was very scary, and we went running, and it was 2002, and we were done. We were out, we're running. But we did it again, like you said, and it wasn't the same experience. So,
man,
I like that. See, that's why you guys got to do user questions.
Yeah, throw some questions out there, and it doesn't have to be that. I always get this thing when it's like almost, and I'm not going to even do the math or even think about it right now, but usually like exactly about 6 months away from Halloween, I get in like my Halloween part 2 mode, and I'm kind of in that right now. I was some spooky podcasts last night too, and I'm kind of in that mode. That's why I had to ask the spooky question. But anyway, that's great answer. I didn't forget about that. I just needed to be reminded. Very spooky experience.
Very. So like I said, make sure you guys send us your questions so we can answer it like that. And there we go. So that has been the Backlotboys once again, episode 3, not 4. I've said 4 many times before the start of the podcast. The only reason I cut in because I didn't want you to say episode 4 again and have us have to re-record the whole deal. That's true. So guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later.